If you tolerate sin, are you not participating in that sin as well?
Hundreds of people take to the streets of San Francisco in support of transgender and drag queen rights.
These are grown adults in bondage gear or in G-strings, strutting around in front of kids, infants, toddlers.
My crotch doesn't look like other women's crotches.
If you tolerate perversion, you'll be ruled by perversion.
We believe that love thy neighbor also means if your neighbor's standing on the railroad, don't say, hey, get off the tracks, because you can make your own decisions. You're a grown adult. We haven't done our job as the church to call out wickedness, to defend those who can't defend themselves, the children. So I find it very interesting that these people claim that it's about how I feel on the inside. It's about what's in here. It's about what's in here. It's about how I feel. But then at the same time, they make the contrary claim that I've never felt more myself unless I wear this, or unless I wear this makeup, or I put on this dress, or I dress a certain way, but it is about what's inside of me. I think that's a very contrary claim, and I find that very interesting.
And in a similar way, society doesn't judge people on their actions or on their deeds. They're judged solely on their opinions. So you could be the most upstanding citizen, you could do the most amazing charitable work, but it doesn't matter because you have a contrary opinion to the mainstream narrative. That's all that counts nowadays.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you conduct yourself in society. It only matters what your personal opinions are. That's why even us talking about this and the issues of transgenderism, radical gender ideology is so dangerous. I mean, we're risking being censored, deplatformed, because it doesn't matter what we do. It only matters that we're saying something that's contrary to what the government, society, mainstream media, the culture is pushing.
Yeah, in recent history, we used to believe that, you were judged based on the content of your character. You were judged by what you say and what you do, how you act and how you present yourself. And now we see that it's actually not any longer about how you act or your character. It's about if you're under a protected class. We saw that in Nashville, where this person shoots a school up, but the media actually runs to defend them and says, actually, Christians are the problem if they commit violence. And there are lots of situations and examples where they've committed violence, heinous crimes. They've hurt people. And the media says, actually, this is your fault because you've forced them to do this because they're a protected class. They're no longer judged by what they say and do or their actions. They're judged by if they check a box. It doesn't really matter how you conduct yourself anymore. It's about, do you fit into this box that we want you to fit into?
That's exactly right. So tell me, do you think that there exists in this country or in the United States institutionalized transphobia, homophobia, racism, all these buzzwords that the left tends to use? Do you think that actually exists? Because from what I see, media, television, the government, the law, the court systems, everything is set up in a way to protect this special class of citizens and to elevate them, so to speak, in society.
100%. I think it's quite the opposite than institutionalized racism or institutionalized prejudice against them. I mean, you look at Harvard, Stanford, these places, they were founded as Christian schools, and they've now taken them and twisted them. You look at the media, they used to start as giving people the news. They no longer do that. You look at all these institutions, and they're on their side completely. They're completely for them. They defend them. They cover their backs. They don't show stuff that wouldn't look favorable upon them, even though they have to cut it very short because it's very hard to do that.
And this especially applies to big tech.
Yeah.
Big tech promotes this probably the most heavily out of every institution.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on what institution you're talking about. I mean, people might say, well, the church, though, we've become cowed. We just accept it. You look at most modern churches and they don't want to touch on that. They'll kind of pull back on that issue because it's a very touchy subject.
Or they'll go over to the other side and be like United Churches, where they're actually pushing this gender ideology onto so-called Christians.
Yeah, 100%.
They're pushing this as if the Bible condones it, as if God is okay with this.
Yeah, exactly. And I've watched some of the clips of these same pastors, and they say, when they're asked, is Jesus the only way, which is, I would say, a very fundamental Christian value. There's state borders, and then there's national borders. So a national border would be, for Christians, Jesus died, rose again, and is the savior of the world. That's a very hard stance to take, but that's what you should take if you're going to call yourself a Christian. More debatable issues would be something like the rapture and other things like that, where it's not a huge dividing line. It's not the be-all, end-all. And I see Christians, they cow back on, is Jesus the way? Even that's a fundamental truth, and they'll stay off that topic.
Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And yet mainstream Christianity teaches that there's more than one way to salvation. There's more than one way to heaven, actually. Some of them are saying that Judaism, Islam, Christians, Buddhists, Hinduists, everything leads to the same goal. But that's completely contrary to Jesus' teachings and the Bible. I mean, fundamentally.
Yeah, exactly. And I find it very interesting. I think the reason they say that they're being institutionally persecuted, that everyone's against us, they need a reason for this high suicide rate. They need a reason for this very high violence rate. They need a reason for this lifestyle and why they're acting out. They're lashing out against people. And it's not a valid reason to say society is against us. It's not true. It's not a valid reason to say all these institutions are against us. It's not true. But they need a reason for their actions. And there is no reason. There's just a wicked spirit behind it. And that's why they're doing this.
That's exactly right. There's a very high demand for persecution in these protected alphabet club, alphabet mafia people groups.
Yeah.
But there's a very low supply because every single institution protects them and promotes them objectively.
Yeah. Well, and you notice with people around you when they're doing something they know is wrong, or when they're doing something that's kind of unacceptable, if you have family members like this or friends like this where they need a reason, well, he did this to me. Okay, that's why I'm acting out like this. Or I was raised like this. I didn't have a good childhood. They need a reason to justify their actions, even though they know their actions are wrong.
Why do you think that they are after men and children specifically the most?
Yeah. I would say it's also women too, but men and children, because men are who God put in place to be the protectors, to be the people who stand against this and take a hard line. People, they like to say, well, toxic masculinity, you guys cause most of the wars. Well, yes, bad men cause a lot of the wars, but good men also come to the aid and stop these wars, and they need that to go away. And as for children, that's the next generation.
Well, here's what I find interesting. When a woman transitions into a man, they don't take on the roles of traditional men, biblical men. They don't do that.
No.
But when men transition into women, they take on these traditional, stereotypical ideas of womanhood with wearing dresses, makeup. And I find that bizarre. It's like they're trying to erase all ideas, all aspects of men.
Yeah.
And women, of course. But it's like they're specifically just trying to eradicate men.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. It's totally true. When you see people like Dylan Mulvaney, people like this, they parody women, right? They do the stereotypical Barbie woman. But on average, when a female transitions to male, they're not parodying a man for the most part. They're not pretending to be a redneck. They're not going out and buying guns. They're not doing this. They just don't want to be a woman. So they're trying to blur the lines between gender and gender identity. And for men, I think there's very much different motivations when they transition to women and why they act a certain way, because fundamentally they are different. So when they switch, they're going to have different behaviors because there's different motivations still underlying.
I think it's extremely insulting to women that a man can just take on womanhood, appropriate womanhood. I think that's extremely insulting. If I was, as a man, when I see a woman trying to appropriate manhood, that's extremely insulting. I'm sorry, you don't know what it's like to be a man.
Yeah.
You can never know that because you're not a biological man. And in the same way, when men are becoming women, which I find more prevalent as an issue, men are becoming women at a higher rate than women are becoming men.
Yes.
So I find that significant in a way because, again, they're trying to erase manhood. They want men gone because when you have strong men, you have a strong society.
Yeah, exactly. They're the front lines. That's not to downplay women. Women play a huge role in the family, actually just as important as the father. But the father is the front lines. The father is the one who's supposed to protect. The man is the one who is supposed to be the first line of defense. And it's exactly that. You don't have a strong society if you get that out of the way. And they want to destroy women too, because women are an extremely important part of the family and raising children and doing all these things. And they're also defenders. But the man is the front lines. And if they can take out the front lines, the head, they can take out the entire family far more easy.
And after they do that, of course, they have to target the children. That's why you have things like happening with Chris from Mr. Beast, Dylan Mulvaney, the media, Hollywood, social media, big tech, pushing this onto children, onto the minds of the impressionable children, drag shows. All this is happening to do what Hitler did in the 1930s with German youth.
Yes.
Hitlerjugend. They
Yes.
wanted to indoctrinate the youth to think a certain way, to believe their narrative, to make them slaves.
Yeah. Hitler was very smart in that sense, that he knew if he could indoctrinate the children, if he could get the children, he wouldn't need to do so much work on the parents if he was getting the younger generation. If he could get them through the children, he wouldn't have to do so much work on the adults. You see, with an adult, they have fully formed opinions. They know more right from wrong. They've had time to rationalize this, and he was finding that a lot harder. But he knew that if he just got into the school systems, if he got into their education, if he propagated this to the children, he wouldn't need to worry about the older generation, because he has a new generation rising up that he's already indoctrinated.
He just needed the minds of the children. And that's exactly what we see today. And after that, they own the entire society. They own the entire culture, and they have citizens of slaves that they are very easily controlled. And that's what we're seeing today, and it's very scary.
Yeah. And I would just ask, what do you think is the best way to combat this, to protect not just your family, but to combat this against society and say, no, actually, I'm rejecting this. This is wrong.
Well, we have to get to the root of the problem. Why is this happening in the first place? We know that we do not fight against flesh and blood, but we fight against principalities and spirits.
Yeah.
So right now, what we're seeing is a spirit over the West, mainly the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
Some of Europe, but the West is under attack of a spirit that is gender bending, that is blurring the lines between traditional men and women. And that is to pervert the idea of, in the beginning, God created the man and woman.
Yeah.
Because Satan is spitting in the face of God, saying that what you created is imperfect.
Yeah.
What you created no longer matters. I'm going to pervert it. I'm going to twist it. And people are going along with this.
Yeah.
So we have to get to the root of that problem if we want anything to be fixed.
Yeah. And if you're a Christian and you're still having doubts whether we're in the end times or we're in the last days, you mentioned a verse from Genesis that he created them male and female. There's a verse that said they will call good evil and evil good. And that's what we're doing. We're calling men women and women men. We're calling murder, abortion good and a free choice and a good thing. And we're calling having children and having a family wicked and evil. And it's taking away your free time and your rights as a woman, and you're not independent anymore, even though that's a beautiful and fulfilling thing to do as a family, as a man and woman. So for me, it's more proof that we are in the last days, that we are in the end of times, because we're starting to call what is wicked good.
How do you combat a lie? You speak the truth. You have to speak the truth daily to combat the lie. Right now, the society, the government is pushing a lie onto the citizens, saying that men can be women, women can be men. There's no such thing as gender. God did not create the male and female. You can do whatever you want. You can feel however you want. There's 666 different genders. We have to combat that by speaking the truth. The churches has to be on the front line saying no to this, and they're not. So what do you expect? If you kick God out, if you don't accept Jesus into your country, into the church even, how do you expect to fight this?
Yeah. I mean, it's sad because it's become cliche, but there's a saying that when good men do nothing, wicked men prevail. And it may be cliche, but it's true, because Christians as a whole have said nothing. We've done nothing, and we have been tolerant for the most part. We've said this is okay. We're gonna leave this alone, live and let live. They're adults, let them make their decision. But we haven't done our job as the church to call out wickedness, to defend those who can't defend themselves, the children. That's what James told them was true religion, is defending the widows and orphans. And we haven't done that as the church. We as the church have not stood up against wickedness, called it out for what it is, and spoken the truth. We've just been tolerant because we believe that love thy neighbor also means if your neighbor's standing on the railroad and a train's coming, don't raise your voice. Don't say, hey, get off the tracks, because, you can make your own decisions. You're a grown adult.
If you tolerate sin, are you not participating in that sin as well? I'll end with a quote by my dad. You will be ruled by what you tolerate. If you tolerate corruption, you'll be ruled by corruption. If you tolerate perversion, you'll be ruled by perversion. And right now we're being ruled by the corrupt and the perverse.